Welcome to CivilNet. I have a very special guest here in our studio, Garo Keheyan. He is the founder and president of the Pharos Arts Foundation based in Cyprus. Garo, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
I've been reading about your foundation, and actually one of the publications from your initiative, Yearning for the Sea, I actually have at home, and I just discovered that it was your initiative. You are doing something in Cyprus that is really quite unique. Outside of the Armenian reality, providing a platform for discourse on the humanities and the arts. And you have a very extensive program. You have workshops and masterclasses and concert series and exhibitions, and you bring some of the best artists from around the world to Cyprus. 1998 you created this, and you've been going strong ever since. Where do you find the stamina to do all of this work?
Well, things evolve gradually over time. When I first started the foundation, to be honest, I didn't have an idea of where we would be today. So things have grown and developed over time, for sure, and the foundation has now established a reputation for excellence in the field that it's in, not only in Cyprus, which is an interesting platform, a crossroads, but throughout Europe. I mean, we have one chamber music festival and one contemporary music festival, both of which are acknowledged in Europe as one of the finest of their kind. So it has grown and developed, as you said, over the last decade and a half. But if you were to ask me today where I'd like to be 10 years from now, I have a very clear idea, but we'll see. Things happen in a accidental way, but also in there's a sort of deliberation too. It's a combination. Yeah.
No such thing as coincidences or accidents. Perhaps in an organic way it evolves. But what was the intention? What was the vision then? I mean, certainly there are a lot of art foundations. There's a lot of cultural initiatives. But what was the message, and what is the message that you try to convey?
Pharos in Greek means a lighthouse, and I think that what we try to do is to enrich people's lives and to connect people to their inner selves through the arts, and particularly through music. I think we live in a very banal world where often material values overtake everything else. There's a wonderful German romantic poet, Daumier. We recently had a Schumann song cycle, and his text was used, and he had also some interesting ideas about history, and he was saying that he doesn't see the world in terms of a class struggle between capitalism and labor, but more in terms of a struggle between coarseness and culture, which is a nice way, I think, of looking at how our world is classified, perhaps. So we try to bring beauty and light. I know they're not very fashionable words, but we try to bring beauty and light and harmony into people's lives.
But they are eternal words, beauty and light.
Yeah.
You do not come from an arts background. You were educated at Oxford, USC, UCLA. You were in development. How does somebody from that background?
Well, I read literature. I read English literature at university. My first degree was in literature, and I think literature covers everything in a sense. But then I did have a period when I was involved in business. I have quite a strong interest in international affairs, international relations. But I was very lucky. Again, if you start at a young age, I think, and are exposed to music. My English teacher at school was a man called Richard Osborne, who is a well-known authority, major music critic in England, and we used to go to concerts in London with the school. So I suppose, then there might be a few genetic musical genes in the family. My great uncle, I think, played the clarinet. My mother's grandfather was an amateur violinist. But I didn't learn an instrument myself, which I regret to some degree. But somebody has to listen.
And is it sponsored by the state of Cyprus, or this is a completely independent arts organization?
It's completely independent. We used to get about 10-15% of our budget from the Ministry of Education and Culture, but it's a very, very limited support. I raise from various sources, and I have myself, of course, committed a vast amount of time, energy, and not least resources to sustain the foundation. But it has to be self-sustaining at some point. Especially, I think, the next step, the next phase, as I mentioned, is to create a major center for the visual and performing arts and a retreat in this beautiful olive grove, which the foundation has the use of outside the city. It's a magical space with 800-year-old olive trees. And the idea is, as I said, to create a world-class, small, intimate space for the visual arts and to provide a platform for global dialogue, to bring artists together from all disciplines, but not only artists, creative thinkers, scientists, a wide range of, yes, and to the space is very important because I think, often meetings take place in conference rooms where the air doesn't circulate. Here you can breathe really fresh air, and it has a magical energy, the space, and I think it plays a role. It's a retreat. It would be a retreat where we could have up to 20 people staying, working, interacting, a crucible, if you like, for creative dialogue and expression.
Garo, aside from the fact that you are an Armenian, does the Arts Foundation have an Armenian component? Do you cooperate with Armenian artists from Armenia and the diaspora?
Of course. I mean, the artistic director of my chamber music festival is Alexander Chaushan from London, great Armenian cellist from Yerevan, together with Levon Chilingirian. But we've hosted many great Armenian artists, Sergei Khachatryan, and of course the two names I mentioned, and many others as well. Narek, the cellist, who recently won the Tchaikovsky competition. But the important thing is that Armenians are interacting with their peers from other countries. So we've had Julia Fisher, we've had Joshua Bell, we've had Leonidas Kavakos, to mention three of the world's greatest violinists. So it creates again an opportunity for Armenians to be seen and to interact in a wider context. But I was also very involved with the visual arts, I should say, and in the early 1990s, I used to come to Armenia. I was probably one of the few Armenians who used to come in those days, so I know that reality very well. And I actually found it a very inspiring environment to be here. I was very fortunate to meet two of Armenia's leading contemporary artists at the time, Sarkis Hamalbarshan, Ararat Sarkis, and things, and together we used to visit in those dark days. The only thing that kept me going was, visiting artist studios. And I prepared in a very short period of time a major exhibition of post-Soviet art from Armenia, which was part of the European Cultural Year in 1995. Approximately 100 works with 12 artists. So it was a major show, and a publication came out of it, Stream of Fire, New Art from Armenia. So in those days, yes, we were very involved with Armenian artists, but since then it's perhaps evolved, and the Pharos Center for Contemporary Art has exhibited major international artists. We have our own space. We've shown more than 20 major international artists from Brazil, from the United States, from Europe, from Russia.
It's extraordinary. I want to talk about the diaspora, the Armenian diaspora.
I'm not the right person, but anyway.
Let's try.
Yeah.
Let's try. The diaspora was created, as a result of the Armenian genocide. Certainly there was a diaspora before that.
There's been a huge diaspora before that.
Before then,
because
certainly.
the genocide or that trauma, which we can talk about, happened so recently in our, we have a very long history. But actually, if one goes back to Byzantine period,
sure.
There's always been relocations and dislocations of Armenians. We live on the geopolitical, cultural, civilizational fault lines between the East and the West. So it's not a condition that we're not aware of.
In talking about contemporary Armenian history, the genocide was that schism, perhaps, and that created the contemporary modern diaspora that we have today. That oftentimes we feel that it's stuck somewhere in the absence of something. It's stuck in genocide, and this is the centenary year, and certainly Armenia and the diaspora have been gearing up for this centenary year that will, on April 24th in a few weeks' time. What can the diaspora do to sort of break free of the sometimes parochial existence and the sometimes the ghettos that have been created in order to maintain Armenian identity? How do we break free of those chains and become part of humanity, of a more global movement as opposed to only our own issues?
Well, as we said, I think it was a huge trauma what happened 100 years ago. It was a huge psychic trauma and a wound that hasn't healed. But 100 years is a short period of time in a nation's history, in the context of global history, world history. And I think that the shock was so intense that it's only now, I think, in second generation, third generation, Armenians are beginning to get back on their feet, if you like. And I think the next century, the 21st century, and I've been following certain meetings that took place in California recently, there's so many talented young Armenians, not only here, but in the diaspora. I see the nation as one. I mean, the nation state is already evolving, and there are other very powerful players in the global community. I think that the 21st century offers an extraordinary opportunity for an Armenian Renaissance. We are connected through this extraordinary World Wide Web, but on all levels, not only physically, but in other ways, psychically, spiritually, emotionally. There are many, many ways that Armenians have an opportunity to connect. About identity, it's a huge subject. I actually want to organize a conference on identity. What constitutes identity? Amin Malouf wrote a book on identity, and he talks about us being able to have multiple identities. I never had an Armenian education. I never went to an Armenian school. My family was not involved in the Armenian political community life. I went to school in England at a very young age. So in a sense, I am not a typical Armenian because I wasn't exposed to the Armenian world. And yet, somehow, one way or another, by accident, I am very connected to my Armenianness, whatever that is. One can discuss it. I mean, it's a very, very big topic.
It certainly is, and something that we could talk about for hours. But did the independence of Armenia change anything for you as somebody who was outside of the confines or the perimeters of the classical Armenian community?
Well, I suppose so, because as I said, I wasn't really ever part of that diaspora community life. And Armenia for me is always an idea, like the Greeks have this idea of being Greek being a state of mind. I suppose, yes, it was an important event, and I thought, I sort of come and meet this country, and it was extraordinary. It was an extraordinary experience, and I think many things developed from there. My more active involvement with the Armenian community globally.
And we spoke about it, about it being the centenary year. You're here now, it's the beginning of April. You won't be here for the 100th anniversary on April 24th, so I assume you'll be in Greece or Cyprus. Or somewhere.
No, I'm in Cyprus. I intend to be in solitary confinement for at least 24 hours.
Why?
And, because I just want that moment of silence and reflection. There will be so much going on, so much noise, if you like. I certainly wouldn't, want to be part of that noise. It's wonderful. There are different ways. Everybody will, I think, mark the occasion in their own way. But as I said, it's a big wound that needs to be healed. And Turkey itself, I think, has to, at some point, reconcile itself to its history, to its past. And I think that it's something, just as we feel this burden, I think whether they do it consciously or subconsciously, it is something that they have to come to terms with. And I think we have to help them in some ways. We have to delve into the depths of our soul and find a bedrock of singularity between us, because they also have traditions, the Sufist mystical tradition, which perhaps we can relate to in some ways. That religions, of course, are exploited and used by the state for their own purposes, but I think there are commonalities of interest which we can explore together at a deeper level.
And just a final question. You spoke about it, but I want to see if we can sort of widen the scope. April 24, 2015, the 100th year anniversary. There has been a lot of talk in some circles in the Armenian world, here in Armenia and in the diaspora, about the 21st century being the century for the Armenians, about that 100-year period of pain that we have sustained through 3 generations, 4 generations, now must evolve into something else. What is that something else for you?
I think it's perhaps reconnecting with our real legacy, our spiritual legacy. We have an extraordinary legacy we should be proud of. Unfortunately, today's wealthy people are perhaps not the patrons of art. I mean, what are we proud of at the end of the day? Our great medieval architecture, our great chants from the 5th century. But we must also look at who the great creators of today are and support them and nourish them. So I think the Armenians should build stronger networks that celebrate our creativity, identify where our centers of excellence and creativity are today, and nourish them and support them. We have extraordinary talent, I think, and it often falls on stony ground. We have to cultivate this Armenian soil and make sure that it flourishes in whatever field people want to express themselves, whether it's in science, in high tech, in genetics, in communications, in a huge range of human activity. I personally am involved in the visual arts, the arts and humanities, but there are so many areas where Armenians excel. We should be connected, I think, globally. We should create a community. Let me put it this way. We should make an effort to create a community of kindred spirits. Identify what we share with each other at the deepest level. I mean, those who feel that need. I mean, everybody obviously operates on a different level. But I think it's vital that we create a global community of kindred spirits from diverse backgrounds who can come together and see how they can support each other and our community. And place our community in a much wider context. Because after all, as I said, we can have multiple identities. I'm a Cypriot, I'm conscious of my Armenian heritage, I'm a European. If I think in a wider context, I'm a citizen of this globe and beyond. I'm maybe a citizen of this solar system and beyond and beyond. We mustn't limit our vision of who we are. As I said, the world is so banal sometimes and so tied to the material plane. We are obsessed with possession, perhaps we should, and that's other issues we can go into, but I mean, what identifies, does a nation have to have its own land to be a nation? Perhaps not. In today's context, it's a virtual reality. We don't necessarily need to, I mean, it's wonderful to have a physical presence as well, but we can transcend that, Maybe the nomadic culture is very interesting, the native Indian culture. As soon as we become settled and we become an agricultural society and we start drawing boundaries and creating our own physical spaces, a lot of problems emerge. The lust for power, for possession becomes very big. But perhaps part of our psyche must realize that there's a certain impermanence to our existence, and Armenians especially, I think, understand the world of paradox. Living on the edge, in fairy tales, in the West, it's once upon a time. But in Armenian, if I'm not mistaken, gar u chigar, there was and there wasn't. That's a wonderful paradox, life and death, light and darkness. We, of all people, I think, are very conscious of these dichotomies, and we must transcend them in a sense, or understand them more deeply, and we should spend more time away from the Khorovats culture and closer to the fire that is in us. I should also mention, perhaps, but we said Khorovats culture. I think I've been a vegetarian for 40 years, and I think that one of the crucial global issues we have to face, besides climate change and other issues, where there's a huge global deficit, I think, in leadership, not only in small, newly independent countries, but on a much larger scale. And I think this issue of food is crucial. The industrial factory farming and the exploitation of the animal world, where billions and billions, tens of billions of animals are slaughtered every year, I think our inhumanity, talking about what we do to each other, in a sense, our inhumanity stems from our callousness and coarseness in relating to the animal world and other worlds, which are perhaps at a different level that we are. I mean, imagine if superhuman species existed and put us into boxes and farmed us and ate from us. Well, in a way, it happens on the invisible levels. Our wars, our destruction, the evil that pervades the world starts from the immaterial planes and then comes down to the physical level. Disease. What is disease? Disequilibrium. lack of balance and harmony, which starts on the higher level and then comes down to the physical level.
Well, Garo, I must say, I mean, from the paradox of being Armenian to finding the light to exploring the possibilities, thank you for this most fascinating conversation. The best of luck with your arts foundation, and hopefully one day ՍիվիլՆեթ will come to the Olive Grove.
That would be great.
And film the most amazing space that you are creating, a platform to discuss the discourse on arts, humanities, and the state of existence of the human race. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest was Garo Keheyan. He is the founder and president of the Pharos Arts Foundation based in Cyprus. Stay with ՍիվիլՆեթ.